What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Junkyard podcast. I am your host, Junkyard James. I'm back with a special edition of this show, recording this on Tuesday, the 29th of October. We are fast approaching the end of October. In a week's time in the United States, if you're listening in the U.S., we will elect a new president. So times are stressful, times are heavy here in the States. And then in the wrestling world, some interesting stuff has been announced that I'm going to briefly discuss here and just kind of give my opinion on it. But first, just got to do a little bit of housekeeping. Go to WWE Shop using the link in the description and help support the podcast. Use our link, check out using our link, buy you some merchandise, and we get a portion of the proceeds of that merchandise. Help support our podcast. Go to the link in the description for our affiliate link to StubHub. Anytime you want to go see a basketball game or a football game, baseball is ending, but hockey's is started right up and it's in full motion. You want to go see any sporting event or entertainment event, WWE event, go to use our link for StubHub. Check out using our link and again help support the podcast. And then last but not least, W.GG, use the code Beyond the Yard at checkout on their energy powder mix, and you can save 10% of your order using the code Beyond the Yard. I've tried the products. They're really good. I'm not a big protein mix guy or energy mix guy, but they're actually really good, and they got a sampler pack there, I think for like $15 or $16 once you use the code, including tax. And so it's a good deal to just sample it out and then maybe make a big purchase of a bigger can of the energy mix. It's W.GG and code Beyond the Yard at checkout. Make sure that you like and subscribe. If you're listening to this on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube page. Episode 2 of JMG Reacts will be released here this Friday. I'll have the Saturday show as well. And all of that good stuff coming up this week. And then as we're heading towards Full Gear, we'll have the prediction show of Full Gear as the Thursday before the show. That's coming up at the end of November. But let's get into it. So WWE announced today that there's a program that they're creating called WWE ID, which I think stands for Independent Development. And I think with this program, and I'm driving right now, and you know I like to record this using my car. I'm driving, or else I would read the press release, but I'm going to basically give you a synopsis of how I perceive this to work. And why I think it might be dangerous for the ecosystem of independent wrestling. And how this could have drastic effects from the top down. From not only AEW, but top indie shows like AML, DDP, GCW, and more. And we'll get into that there in a second, the effects. But so what is this program, Independent Development? Essentially, what's happening is WWE is trying to figure out a way to train and develop up-and-coming wrestling talent. And so they're giving what they call WWE ID official designations to top training facilities in the United States. So Seth Rollins training facility, Booker T's training facility, the Nightmare Factory, and a few other ones have already been given this designation. They're also going to label top independent talent as basically WWE ID prospects, independent development prospects. With these independent development prospects, essentially they're going to pay them to train in these gyms, in these facilities, using WWE's platform to give them basically a foot in the door for the opportunity to work in the WWE. So they won't be on WWE programming, they won't be on NXT. From my understanding, they'll just be training in these gyms, and then whatever indie shows they work, WWE will have the platform, social media-wise, to basically shout them out. Like, look at this match from X, Y, and Z. And for these top independent stars, this seems like a good thing, right? At least in the short term. Like, because you're going to get stars like Ella Envy and Christina Marie and I can only name Carolina guys and gals. I think people like Zuka King, Bojax, who might be on the radar of WWE talent, right? And I'm not heavy on like independent wrestling, right? Like, I support the Carolina programs because that's where I live, and if I were to go to a different area, I would support the independent wrestling in that area. So like right now, I'm like super big in the Carolina, like those Dawson brothers, George South, like those are some of the people that White Mike, Bruiser, not Bruiser Brody. I can't remember his name. But like, the Carolina scene is pretty nice. And there's some really good young prospects in the Carolina scene that are being pushed out by wrestling programs like AML. And I know Glenn Jacobs has this wrestling school up in Tennessee that is really good. I think Tom Pritchard works with them. And these wrestling schools don't have this designation of being a WWE ID program. And so my biggest fear is you're going to see these top prospects from all over the United States. And the same way that Vince McMahon tore up the territories, he offered big money to people like Hulk Hogan and the like to leave their local territory to come work for the WWF at that time. And it left the territories with no other option but fold to the WWE system and sell their company to Vince. Now, I don't know if that's the biggest push. Like, I don't know if Hunter and all of the people in WWE are like, we got to buy up all these independent programs. But I think that's going to be the effect in some regards is you're going to pull the money makers from these independent wrestling programs. And some of these wrestling schools are going to fail to be able to find new talent. Because the WWE is going to sign all the good guys. Going to sign all the up-and-coming stars. And so I have a lot of questions regarding this program because the press release was very, very vague. And it gave like this really corporate PR answer of like what the program's supposed to do is expand WWE and the independent ecosystem and all of this other bullshit. But like, it gives me the feeling that they're just going to poach and hoard top training talent, pay him decent money to just train and train and train for a couple of years with this idea of we're always moving talent from NXT to the main roster, and so there's going to be holes to fill in NXT, And then once you get into NXT, then you can move into the main roster after some time. And it seems like it's just a way to, a stepping stone to accelerate your progression into the WWE. Because let's just be honest, even guys like AJ Styles, it took a decade plus to get to the WWE. And so, my concern is that this doesn't just affect the independent scene in the United States. My concern is that this may have international effects, because you have guys like AJ Styles did, who they go to New Japan, or they go to TNA, or they go to Mexico to work in Mexico, or work in the dojos in Japan, and they bust their butt and they pay their dues and they become a young lion, or they work for, GCW for some time, or they work for AML for some time, with the idea of like, if only I can just attract one person to look at my tape at WWE, maybe I can get a tryout. Here's my thing. Here's why I think WWE's kind of switching shop. Because you remember back in the 2020, 2021, when all that NIL stuff passed with the NCAA, the WWE was quick to pounce on that NIL program. And they signed a bunch of college athletes that had no wrestling experience to NIL deals, development contracts that made them exclusive to WWE. And the idea is they would train in the Performance Center for a period of time, and if they were good enough, they would work in NXT and move their way on up. And the success rate of that program isn't great. Like, I think more of these NIL contracts get cut early than we see them work out. Like, for every Kalani Jordan, there's 3 or 4 people that don't work out. For every Sol Ruka, there's 3 or 4 that don't work out. And so there's not a lot of success training with this NIL program. And I think part of the reason is a lot of these wrestlers, they were just there for the NIL portion. I'm not 100% convinced that a lot of them really even wanted to wrestle, and they just wanted the exposure that a big name like WWE provides. They get their NIL money, they do a little bit of training, and then they realize it's not worked, it's not cut out for me, and then they leave. Even like the Cavender twins at some point were part of the NIL deal with WWE, and I don't know if they still are, but that didn't seem to work. And so it seems like WWE is having a mindset of like, when we're creating and developing new wrestlers, we want to go ahead and establish those who have, one, the passion to be a pro wrestler, but 2, a basic knowledge of what it means to do basic wrestling things. Can you at least have a little bit of ability to tell a promo? Do you have a basic knowledge of running the ropes? And then they can develop them to do it the WWE way, but instead of having to basically explain to just some athletic person what it means to be a wrestler, and start from the ground up, like they had to do with some of these NIL programs. You look at like Gable Steveson, and I don't know if he was part of the NIL program or if he was just signed out of college, but like, he didn't work at all. He was awful in the WWE. And so I think this is WWE's way of saying, here's how we develop the next generation of really good wrestlers, and we're going to take the top development talent that have A, the passion, and B, a footing in wrestling. So we don't have to like teach them the groundwork. We can just kind of throw them into these top schools with the top trainers and the top equipment, and give them a little bit of money. And my fear is it's going to be like these NIL deal program, like this NIL stuff, where they're going to have to contractually sign these wrestlers to some form of contract, and that contract is essentially going to say you can only wrestle at the independent promotions that we designate that you can work for, and only do the matches that we approve you to do. And essentially, your job is just to train with us. And once you train and you show us how good you can be, you're essentially exclusive WWE wrestlers, and we'll transfer your development contract to an actual wrestler's contract as soon as we deem that you're ready to work in the WWE. And so my first question would be, would TNA, MLW, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and hell, even kind of the top indie promotions like AML or DPW or GCW, will they be allowed to use these developmental talent while they're training in these WWE facilities? Because my belief is that the answer will be no. And what that means is WWE is just going to find talent that they deem to be really good talent, that they know AEW or some of these other companies may be interested in signing, because the way the press release reads, it's not just like year one wrestlers that are going to be signed. It's like people that are established, like they're not in AEW or they're not in WWE, but they're working their way up the indie scene. They'll be allowed to join this program as well. And so you're going to see people like Christina Marie, and I love her. She deserves to go to the WWE. She's really good, but she's going to, let's just say she signs with this program, or Ella Envy, or I'm trying to think or like Bojack. I think that's his name, Bojack. Or some of these other guys that are like top independent guys. Hell, even like someone like Matt Cardona, who I don't think is necessarily signed with a promotion. He just kind of works handshake deals with some of these promotions. He could sign with this program. And can Matt Cardona then go to GCW, TNA, AEW if he wants? Can he go to CMLL? Can he travel the world and do the independent stuff? So that's my biggest question, is are they contracted WWE developmental, are they going to have contracts? Because the way that I see it, there's no other way that they can do this program without having some form of contractual agreement on how much they're going to pay these wrestlers, which means there has to be some form of contract. And knowing WWE, they're not just going to have a contract be non-exclusive. Like, they're going to put some form of exclusivity clause in this contract. And to me, that's poaching. You're poaching talent, or hoarding, whatever word you want to use. So it's not that WWE's main goal now is to hoard the top free agents that have already made a name for themselves in New Japan and AEW and etc. TNA, CMLL. It's people like Julia and Ethan Page and Stephanie Vaquer. Not only do they want to hoard the top talent there, they now want to hoard or poach the top developmental talent so that AEW cannot even have a chance to sign them. TNA won't even have a chance to sign them. MLW won't have a chance to sign them. CMLL, New Japan, any of the British promotions. Defy, GCW. What happens to these top wrestling promotions? Let's just say WWE signs a contract to work with some of them. What happens to the others? What happens to the smaller brands? What happens to them? What happened to the non-WWE ID designated training facilities? Because if you're an up-and-coming talent with a focus and an eye on getting a foot in the door to get to WWE, and you have to make the decision of leave North Carolina to go to Atlanta, or to go to Houston, or to go to Iowa, to go to one of these schools that are WWE ID affiliated, or stay home and go to one of these non-WWE affiliated or designated school training facilities. You won't have the access that WWE provides. You won't have the best equipment, and you won't have this, and you won't have that. Like, what are they going to pick? Like, you would be dumb to think that these top talent wouldn't join the WWE designated program. You would be dumb to think that. And they would be dumb not to. I'm not saying that they're in the wrong for doing it. But for these blind WWE supporters that think that this is just some way that WWE is trying to, like, make the independent scene like a thriving ecosystem, it's actually doing the exact opposite. It's doing the exact opposite. And I fear that it's going to be too late for any changes to happen by the time that we notice what's actually happening. Like, I went ahead and said my thoughts on it on social media today, and I've been getting eaten alive all day by these WWE cultists who think that, like, I'm dumb for thinking that all this is going to be is the WWE poaching developmental talent and some form or some attempt to stop the competition from even having a chance to scout and develop and sign these talents. This is exactly how Tony Khan does it. He goes into a market, he finds some top talent that have them work a few enhancement matches, maybe a dark match on a show like that's not recorded on a show, maybe work ROH for a while, and then they sign, they move into AEW territory. Like, this is exactly how Chris Statlander got her push in AEW. And several others. Action Andretti. Trying to think of a few others that, like, they got a really big push because they weren't big stars, but they won the crowd over and Tony Khan signed them. Like, and so WWE saying, if we can sign them before they even get that opportunity, then we prevent AEW from being able to even have the ability to build the next generation of wrestling. Like, look at the way that it reads. Look at the way that, like, this is the way I see it. It's like, remember when, like, Vince McMahon took over from his father, and he essentially just paid the top talent at these territories top dollar to basically poach and hoard the top talent in AEW, or in these territories to go to WWE. I'm sorry, and eventually, at some point in time, the territories had to sell to Vince, or just they ran out of business and Vince took the territory. And these WWE fans are like, the territory days are back. I'm like, no, it's the opposite of what happened during the territory days. This is going to destroy independent wrestling. This is going to destroy any ounce or semblance of competition between WWE and AEW and MLW and GCW. And it's like, why are you praising this? Why are you supporting this? Why do you, like, if AEW did something like this, like, these are the same fans that bitched and moaned at the rumor that Tony Khan may implement a policy to where if you work Forbidden Door and you're not really an AEW talent, if you're not already signed an AEW contract and you work Forbidden Door, you cannot just go straight to WWE immediately after. There's a waiting process. You can't sign a contract for a certain period of time. And they bitched and moaned and said, well, Tony Tony, this is bad for the business. If the WWE's interested, they should be able to sign them. Why are you restricting WWE's access? And yet, nothing's wrong with this. And like, Tony Khan shouldn't have to put clauses and contracts together that say that you can't sign with your competitor immediately after working with at one of our biggest international shows, because like, WWE shouldn't be contract tampering or working around some sort of system to sign these talents anonymously or just kind of out of the blue. Because there have been several occasions now where talent have worked a show for AEW. I can think of Dragon Lee, Stephanie Vaquer, Motor City Machine Guns, Ethan Page, where they were for one day working in AEW, doing good things in AEW, doing, contracts, all we know is that their contract was close to expiring, but they hadn't expired yet, and then like a week after Forbidden Door or a week after whatever, they've somehow found a way out of their contract, and they're heading straight to WWE. There's been several attempts, and if WWE didn't have to be sleazeballs with these contracts, Tony Khan wouldn't have to even threaten to put those clauses in his contracts. And here WWE comes again, and I feel like this is some form of like retaliation of like, all right, well, we'll just buy up all of the top developmental prospects, train them the way that we want them to, even though our performance center doesn't have a good record at training some of these people. Like Jade Cargill's still the same as she was in AEW. She hasn't gotten any better in the ring. I don't care what anybody says. She was already a good promo, so I don't feel like you can say her promo skills got better in WWE, and she's just as green in the ring as she was when she left AEW. And so they pulled the red carpet out for her, put her in the Performance Center for a while, and it didn't really do anything for her. So what makes me think that this program is going to be any different? Right? For the last 6 months, 8 months now, all I've heard is, man, if only AEW had a chance to get a Performance Center, they could start training some of these young prospects to do good, and then WWE is basically going to abandon the Performance Center training method and have their developmental prospects train at these wrestling schools. So, like, y'all can't fucking talk to me about AEW needing a performance center when I don't even know if the WWE believes in their performance center. Long story short, I feel like this is the beginning of the end of the independent system. Like, you can look back and in October 29th of 2024, it's going to be a day in history where people look back and say, this moment in time is when the independent system of pro wrestling started to fail. And it's just, in my opinion, a terrible thing. Because you're going to destroy decades-long, centuries-long wrestling programs, wrestling development programs in the United States and maybe even worldwide, because these top talent are going to feel like they can take that quick step from training school to WWE by going to a WWE preferred training school, designated training school, over some other training school who desperately needs talent that they can put on a card so that they can sell tickets to show how good that they are at training. If if you fail to go to AML's training school, AML's not going to have talent that they can showcase on their shows with the likes of the top stars. Like usually, like AEW will send the Acclaimed or FTR or some big person to fight against some of the local independent talent. And if that local independent talent is not coming to these schools and they're not allowed to work shows that WWE doesn't allow them to work, because there's going to have to be some form of contract. I'm not that naive to think that there's not going to be some form of contract. And I'm sure that contract says you're going to work the shows that we tell you can work, doing the things that we tell you can do, and you're exclusively the WWE's official training. We're not going to pay you to train, to work, with the option of signing with the competitor. WWE would be dumb to pay these people to train in these programs, to give them the access that they're going to give them, and leave the door for them to sign with AEW or some other competitor at the same time. WWE is too smart of a business. Triple H is too smart of a businessman to leave that open. So you can't sit here and tell me that these people will not have any sort of contract. And so end of the day, I feel like if you make it exclusive and these top talent can't go to these areas that they need to go, you got to think of like WrestleCon, WrestleCade, all these Comic-Cons, all these wrestling conventions, these local independent shows that desperately need to have some developmental talent so that they can showcase some of these other top independent guys and gals. If they don't have that ability, then I think we're slowly going to see wrestling promotion after wrestling promotion after independent promotion after independent promotion, wrestling school after wrestling school close down for the sole reason of they can't afford it, or they can't find the talent, or they can't pay the bills, or the WWE's taking away options for them to work with certain talent. And I just don't see it as a net positive. And in the short term, it may do some good for some of these top stars. It may get them developed. But if you look long term, what does this do to the industry of pro wrestling? I don't think WWE cares. I think they're cutthroat. I think they don't want competition. I think WWE thinks the sooner that AEW is out of business, the better it is for them. They want to institute a form of monopoly on the wrestling business that's going to do a great harm to the wrestling business. And that's all I got to say. I'll see y'all on Saturday for my live stream there, where I have another show. And then Friday, remember that we have episode number 2 of our Junkyard Media Group Reacts show that we're testing out here. And that'll be posted on Friday around noon. So with that being said, we will talk to you next time. Have a good one.